Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we're the Youngs.
We're so glad you joined us today as we continue in Valentine's month.
Yes, and it's Valentine's week, so
Yay!
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day and happy birthday to you, babe.
Absolutely. It's a busy week, and our son Matthew has a birthday this week.
Yes,
so
he does.
It's a big family celebration week for the Youngs. Happy birthday, Matthew, if you listen to your mom and dad's podcast, which you should. Amen. And happy Valentine's Day to all of you. I know it's a different kind of week for some of you. You know, 'cause sometimes we get people, well, I'm single, so Valentine's Day doesn't matter to me or whatever. And I would just remind you that everybody can celebrate Valentine's Day because we all believe in love, and it's an opportunity for you, if you're single, maybe to, offer to watch someone's children so they can go out, or to gather all your buddies together and just have a guy's night out or a ladies' night out, and go somewhere and eat a nice meal. Go somewhere and have a good time together, because we celebrate friendship and romance and all of that in Valentine's week.
Right.
So it's a wonderful week, and I hope you guys are making good plans for the week ahead. We are excited here at our church because we're doing a parents' night out, and Bethlie and I are hosting all the children, so moms and dads can go out on a date if they so wish, and so we're looking forward to that.
Yes,
and it's
we
going to
are.
be great. So anyway, it's Happy Valentine's Day, and we hope you've enjoyed so far the Valentine's month, the month of February here. Of course, we started, I think, the last week in January. We finished that series, and now we're going to start a new series today. And maybe a little heads up for you moms and dads that have little ones, or if you're listening to this, if you're sitting in the airport and you're listening to it, like a lot of people do now, with just no headphones. Just be aware of the fact that this one's going to be a little special in the sense that we're going to be taking a couple of episodes here. We talked about how to keep your marriage fresh and alive, and we're going to talk about now how to keep your bedroom fresh and alive.
Right, which has to do with keeping your marriage fresh
Yes,
and alive.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
But before we do that, we have a little opportunity here. We've asked people if they wanted to write in and let us know something special about their marriage or a little tribute to their spouse. They can certainly do that. We've mentioned several. We've not gotten as many this year, at least not yet. We're going to keep this open for another week or so, just to see if any others come in.
Right.
And yet we have a couple to share with you today. Our friend Daniel Dietrich, he actually wrote us and said, "Good evening, Brother and Mrs. Young. Hope you're well. My wife and I enjoy listening to the Keeping It Young podcast and are excited about the ministry the Lord has led you to in Missouri." And just a little personal greeting there. And then he said, "You asked for emails to brag on how special your spouse was." Your spouse. Let me try that again. How special your spouse was. When I first heard, I thought my wife Laura is so special, this will be easy. But sitting down and trying to put into words how special she has been is way more difficult than I had first thought. So how do you put into words how special the gift that God has given you that is only second to His love for you and your salvation? Well, he says this: "She's a gift from the Lord. I work, I get paid, and I bring home money. When that money touches her hands, it miraculously changes things like groceries into fabulous meals, books into education for our children, a house into a beautiful, loving home, a night with the family or a night with the kids into family memories, a date with her into magical romance. Everything I give my wife, she takes and makes something better." I could go on, but she would be very embarrassed if she knew I was bragging on her in such a way. Well, Daniel, I got bad news. I think she's going to know.
Yes.
She is the most gifted person that I know. Her titles include, but are not limited to, doctor, teacher, chef, housekeeper, interior designer, gardener, chauffeur. The list could go on and on. The three best titles are daughter of the king, mommy, and loving wife. If she received a salary for all the jobs she does throughout the day, we would both probably be able to retire. Her price is truly far above rubies, and as her husband, I'm honored to be able to take this chance to praise her in the gates. She is blessed as Solomon said. I think that was a sweet tribute.
That was wonderful, Daniel.
Thank you for that. And then he did put in here, just if you're Mrs. Dietrich and you're listening, he said, if she were reading this, she would probably have her hand over her face, shaking her head at my terrible English. So I thought you did fine there, Daniel, so no worries at all.
I did too, and I am a former English teacher, so I think, Daniel, you did great. And honestly, Laura, you have an amazing husband who would write such wonderful things to you.
Absolutely. And then, Bethlie, read this next one here.
from Alexis Stevens. She said, "Good afternoon, Pastor Young. I listen to your podcast with your wife every week and wanted to take part in the fun couple notes, poems, etc." She said, "I have no talent in poems, but here's my Love Month tribute to my husband, Brendan Stevens. To love is a blessing God has given mankind, but to love a spouse is an entire other matter. I wish I could talk extravagantly of the many ways I've loved my husband, but my list would come quite short to the love my husband has shown me in our almost 5 years of marriage. Providing for our family may be what many consider most important in a husband, but the pages of scripture read and daily prayer are so evidenced through his love to me and our daughters. Brendan is my favorite children's pastor, lover of my heart, and committed father to our daughters. In the daring love stories about princes and dragons, the love demonstrated in the pages of those stories couldn't compare to God's love shown in every dish washed after a long work and church day, book after book read to our 21-month-old, soothing of our newborn in the middle of the night, and figuring out a new relationship with our recent extra daughter. I love, and I love loving you, Brendan." And then she signed it, "Thanks and have a great day, Alexis Stevens."
And that's a beautiful tribute as well. And Brendan, we are happy for you that God's blessed you with such a wonderful family. And we're certainly thankful for the friendship your family's shown to us through all these years. But Brendan's mom and dad have been friends of ours for almost our entire married life, if not our entire married life.
Oh, before. Yeah.
And then there's one more to share with you today. And this came from Anna Pora. And she said, "Here's an email about my spouse, Isaac." She also said, "We love your podcast." So we just knew right away she's very intelligent, very full of godly wisdom. And,
right. Yes.
So she said, "Here's my email about my spouse, Isaac." And she said, I could say so much about my wonderful spouse, Isaac. We've been married 4 years and have 2 kids, Sophia 3 and Joseph 9 months. We were both 31 when we got married, and after years of praying and waiting for the right one, God brought us together. My husband is from Papua New Guinea, and although we knew each other for years through my brother in college, we had no idea that someday we would fall in love and get married. We both separately claimed Psalm 84:11, "No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly," while waiting for God to bring the right one along, and now we have that verse hanging on our wall in our home. My husband is hardworking, he loves the Lord, puts our family first, and is an incredible dad. He's just the one that God knew I needed, and I thank the Lord that even though it was hard to wait until age 31 to get married, it was so worth it to have God's very best in a spouse. And I thought that was just a really sweet tribute. And they sent us a lovely, lovely photograph of their family.
Yeah, they have an adorable family.
And do you remember we met Isaac at the camp?
At Southland.
Yes, at Southland. And he was working there, and we got to know him. So we're so happy for you guys, and that was a wonderful tribute. So listen, if you're listening and you're thinking, boy, I should have done that, still time.
Oh, yes.
And so get right on it and get it to us so we can add it to a future podcast. And we'll choose 1 or 2 of these and get a hold of you, and we'll honor somebody with a couple of gift cards to a coffee shop.
Right.
So
one of the things I love about reading these things is, first of all, it's just encouraging to meet other couples who are investing in their marriage. When you are thankful for each other, when you're praising each other, when you're loving on each other, and you're willing to put it on paper, or should I say on a computer screen, that just shows that there are godly marriages out there. And sometimes I think you can feel like if you're in a small town or whatever, and you can think, man, are we the only ones working on our marriage? If you're in ministry and you're constantly working on the couples in your church, and you feel, and you know who's struggling, who's not struggling, whatever, you can feel like, oh, is anyone else trying to serve the Lord together? So I think these are encouraging. I think also they're a good testimony for those of you out there that are like, man, I don't know that I could write that about my spouse. Maybe go back and listen to the past 2 episodes about how to keep your marriage alive and fresh. And then also sit down and maybe make a list, not of the things that they're doing wrong. That can be so easy to do, to list all those things they're doing wrong, but list the things they're doing right. And maybe you can write your own love letter. Maybe it won't even be one that you send us, but certainly one that you could share with your spouse, and that would spice up your Valentine's Day.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to segue into our series. And so let's get started today. How do you keep the bedroom alive and fresh?
Yes,
Is
and
the title of this specific episode.
that cues all of the mamas out there to pop in the headphones or the earbuds or whatever, or maybe wait and listen when the little ears are sleeping.
Or listen together as husband and wife.
There we go.
And so we want this to be a real help. The Bible says in Hebrews 13:5, marriage is honorable in all. It's always a good thing to be married. And then the writer of Hebrews adds to that, and the bed is undefiled. The bed, the bedroom, the relation of a husband and wife in their bedroom is of God. It's not dirty, it's not evil, it's not godless, it's not wicked. It's not Hollywood's idea, it's not Satan's idea, it is undefiled. And then the Bible does add to that, just worth our pointing out here, that whoremongers and adulterers God does judge. So God honors marriage, celebrates it, promotes it, designed us for marriage. All the sexual satisfaction that is available in life has to be through marriage to honor God and to bring God's blessings and favor into our life.
Right.
And if we certainly abuse that, then there are great damages that come because we're under the judgment of God. So how do you keep the bedroom alive and fresh? This is where we want to get started. And what would you say first of all?
Well, think about each other in, quote, that way.
Does that make sense to y'all that are listening? I think it probably does. That so many times we think about so many things. Sometimes in a marriage we can think about the negative.
Right.
And we can think about a problem, we can think about issue, we can think about busyness, we can think about our jobs, we can think about our calendar, we can think about our schedule, we can think about the children's needs.
Yes.
And there's just a ton of things that demands our attention. But what I wanted to say to you was that we need to think about each other in that way. And in that way, as you're thinking, just a couple of things we thought we could help you with. First of all, remember that marriage is made up of seasons. Life is made up of seasons.
Right.
And one of the things we're enjoying about living in Missouri is we are experiencing the seasons in a different way than we've experienced them in recent years.
Well, yes, winter is a lot more winter here than it was in Northwest Florida.
No, in Northwest Florida, they did recently get, like what, 8 or 9 inches of snow.
It was
so
a
it was
lot.
once in a century snowstorm, I guess. But seasons are normal to life, and they do affect us all differently. And sometimes we have a hard time thinking in that way through various seasons of life. Mm-hmm. But, it's a good thing for a husband to think about his wife in that way, and a wife to think about her husband in that way. That is a very good thing. And so, there's different seasons. Like some of you have small children. You're young parents with small children. And maybe, you're a mom out there, and if you're not careful as a mom, you never think about your husband in that way. Probably you're thinking at times about, don't ever touch me again. These children are killing me. But what we just, Beth and I want to say, if your bedroom, if this super important and vital part of your marriage is going to stay alive and stay fresh, you do have to think about each other in that way. And even if you are young and you have little children, Mom, you have to think about your man in that way. And guys, you have to continually make sure in this sin-cursed world that you don't allow your thoughts to go in another way. It's an easy thing for our generation to do. But all of your sexual drive, your sexual thoughts should always be about each other. And so no matter what the season, if you have teenagers in your house, teenagers can be they can really mess with the bedroom. And in the sense that normally teenagers come alive. They awaken about 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night at the time when the parents of teenagers are starting to be ready to go to bed and to go to sleep. And that can affect things. And then, maybe you're going through a season where your wife is pregnant. That's a season of life that affects how you think about each other during that. Mm-hmm. But the point we want to make, no matter what season, whether you're, just newlyweds or getting older or whatever the season, maybe you're just even struggling a little bit physically with your health or with a kind of an emotional time in your life. Don't forget to think about each other in quote unquote that way.
Right.
Right.
So I would say that it doesn't matter the season of life you're in, whether it's with the young children, which is a busy, busy time, and young mamas can get very overwhelmed and very tired, and that seems to be the intimate part of their life can seem to be at the bottom of the list. And then when you have teenagers, it's not so much that it's the bottom of the list. It's just you can't get the teenager out of your bedroom. And by the time they do leave your bedroom, you're like, I'm so tired. I do love you, but I'm going to sleep. And then you hit menopause. And for men, they have the quote midlife crisis or whatever. And it can be easy, I think, at least for women, because your hormones are bottoming out. You don't have them anymore. And so that intimate life is it's difficult because you don't have that factor going on in your body anymore. And so any season that you're in, it can be very easy to think to yourself, you know what? We don't need to think about that right now. We're just busy with this. Or we don't need to think about that right now. I even have had ladies who are going through perimenopause or menopause who have said, oh, well, that's just not important anymore. But the Bible does talk about it enough that we do need to be aware of it in the seasons of life. And I think we'll talk about soon how that we can adjust during different seasons of life so that it does stay a priority. But do think about that instead of going through your day going, I don't have time for that. Why does he even think about that? Or my goodness, we're not like that anymore. Just make it a priority and do think about each other in that way.
And when it comes to this thinking about each other in that way, start with positive thoughts. So sometimes it's a memory where you're remembering why you fell in love and the early days of your marriage and what each other, what you love about each other and what you like about each other and what just even what you want to be better can be a positive thought. It can be like, we're going to work on this so we can even be better. Mm-hmm. And so you start with positive thoughts. Negativity always damages a marriage, and we have to continually be aware of that. And we have to, it's probably good to be aware that it's normal for your spouse probably to think about the bedroom differently than you do. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes because this is such a private area, the bedroom in a marriage, such a private area, that sometimes we never talk to anybody about it, never read a book about it, never, nobody ever, talks or discusses it. And sometimes we feel like in our specific situation that we're alone. Like, well, right. Nobody other couples are probably this way. And it's easy to assume, well, I bet they're like this, or I bet they're like that. But it's very normal. It's very normal, for instance, for Bethlie and I to think about things differently. It's very normal. Bethlie's being a lady, me being a man. We have different thoughts, different needs, different desires. So it is a very normal thing for couples to think about the bedroom differently. And it's also, I think it's okay to say that it can be a very normal thing to struggle in various seasons of life. So one of the things we're saying is that in the seasons of life, when it's harder to think that way, it's important to think that way.
Right.
And it's just one of those things where we have to prioritize this. Beth and I found that reading a book together occasionally, and just about the bedroom, the book Intimate Issues or Sheet Music or The Act of Marriage or The Act of Marriage After 40 or Dr. Ed Wheat's book Intended for Pleasure, just reading those kind of books that are Christian books written from a Christian perspective by people that love God and love the Bible. Just sometimes reading those books remind us of that important part of our marriage, and we have to work on that.
Right.
So we would start by saying, think about each other in that way. Would you add anything to that?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's get the second one here. How do we keep the bedroom alive and fresh? Number 2.
Talk to each other about needs, desires, and wants.
Now, this is a big one. Because one of the things, don't you agree with this, as we counsel couples and talk to different couples, one of the hardest things in the world seems to be that for this area, it seems difficult for couples to talk about.
Right.
It's like we know, this is, couples who are married do that. And yet, sometimes a guy will come and share with me, this is, I'm frustrated about this. What should I do? But he's never one time talked to his wife about it. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes ladies will come to you, but they've not talked to their husband about it. Or sometimes they try to, and it doesn't go well. And Bethlie and I are just saying to you, if we're going to keep our bedrooms alive and fresh, talking to each other about needs, desires, and wants, that is an essential part of keeping the bedroom alive and fresh.
And just going back to our first point, you have to almost constantly have that communication open in those different seasons of life, because once the children start coming along, it's not going to look like the same as it did when you were newlyweds. And once you have teenagers, it's not going to be the same. And once you have perimenopause, it's not going to look the same. And I'm sure once we hit a certain maturity, it's not going to look the same. But you need to keep that communication open. I think it can be awkward because it is such a sensitive area. It's called intimacy for a reason, because you are very vulnerable. And so make sure that you choose your time to talk about it. Maybe don't get in the middle of an embrace and be like, oh, by the way, because
that probably would be a bad idea.
that could be a mood killer right there. But choose your time wisely, choose your words wisely, ask the Lord to help you, pray about it, and then approach each other just gently and lovingly, not with the idea of, you're not meeting my need in this area, but how can we be better in this area?
Yeah, so here are some questions that probably could help us to, talk through our needs, our desires, and our wants. And the first one is, how often? And sometimes you just have to discuss that, especially during various seasons of life. Maybe in a newlywed couple, when all is well, that is kind of a given. And so, it just happens. But as you have children, as you get older, as you're dealing with issues, as you're working through things, as health changes and all of those kind of things, it's still not a bad idea to occasionally just talk through the question: how often should we do this? How often do you want to do it? How often, do I want to do it? And to discuss those things can be very helpful. How often is a good question you can discuss.
Right.
And here's another one: in what way? Can be a question you can discuss. This can be a little bit awkward here.
Right.
But the idea is, in what way do you desire us to have sexual relations in our marriage? Is your, desire that we, start in a certain way? Do we shower together first? Do you prefer that we, that we do it at a certain time? So in what way are we going, is this, do we just need to be faster? Or do I desire more what Bethlie and I sometimes call gourmet? And so those are the questions. In what way? So how often?
Right.
In what way? And that can vary from couple to couple. There's not a right way necessarily, as long as you're thinking about each other and making an effort to keep the bedroom alive and fresh.
Well, and those can be, in what way, can mean also the adjustments that you make as your children are growing older. Maybe all of a sudden you're an empty nester and you feel like your husband is chasing you around the house all the time just because you're an empty nester, and you're like, wait. We still have to live life. I haven't gotten there yet. So
I was curious about this. Is this prophesying?
No. Anyway, goodness, now I'm embarrassing myself, and it's just us in this room. But anyway, it could just be all those different seasons of life. How can we adjust to this, and how does it work well for both of us?
Absolutely. Here's another question you can use to talk about each other's needs, desires, and wants, and that's the question, when? How often should we, practice our bedroom relationship? In what way we, would meet each other's needs? And then when? And this one can vary. It can vary by the fact that our lives are very scheduled. So sometimes we just have to talk about when fits into our schedule, that we can prioritize this and keep our bedroom alive and fresh. It might be that it varies by job demands. Like I know we were talking to friends recently who, I think he told me he worked, it was either like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years on the night shift. So when everybody else was going to bed, he was going to work. And when everybody else is getting out of bed, he's coming home. And yet in our conversation, he talked to me about how that part of their marriage, the bedroom, still was active and working, and it just varied by their schedule. And so sometimes you have to change when. And it can vary by the age of your children.
Right.
When your children are tiny, and you got a baby waking up every 3 hours, it might be that you're more alert as soon as your husband comes home and the baby's napping. Mm-hmm. Or it might be that, in the morning, the baby's awake and then takes a quick nap after you've fed the baby. So you just have to adjust. It's okay. This part of a marriage is a vitally important part, the bedroom.
Right.
And so you have to talk about how often or in what way. You have to talk about the when, and that becomes more important as you get older.
Well, and I would say sometimes girls, we get this idea that it always should be this romantic spontaneity, and that is wonderful when it can happen that way, but it's also okay for it to be scheduled, especially when you are getting busy, when those children are coming along and schedules and what have you. It's okay to sit down with your husband and be like, okay, let's try to make a schedule this week between your schedule and my schedule. When can we actually meet in our bedroom?
And here's a couple of others. You could talk about, and these are very good questions to discuss periodically. What do you need? What are your needs? And parallel to that may be the question, what are your wants? What do you want? And the goal in a marriage is for us to be close. The word is intimate. We're to be intimate. We're to be closer. The marriage relationship should be closer than any other relationship. And mom, don't forget this. It's more important than your relationship with your children or with your mom or your dad. And sir, it's more important than your children or your mom or your dad. It is absolutely vitally important that we talk about that question. What do we need? And what do you need? What do you want? That's an idea of asking and listening. So wives, it'd be a good idea to schedule a time to just have time with your husband, ask him that question. When it comes to our bedroom, what do you need? What do you want? And guys, it's not a bad idea to ask your wife that. What do you need? What do you want?
Right.
And it's a chance not to get defensive, not to fuss about things with each other, but to listen. Because it leads us to the fifth question. And the fifth question is, what do we need?
Right.
What do you need? What do you want? Should lead to the question, what do we need? What would work for our marriage to help us be closer, as close as possible in this particular area of our marriage? Right? And there's one more question there.
What can we do to meet each other's needs?
And that's a good question as well. So some of those are spilling into each other just a little bit, but what can we do to meet each other's needs? Notice we start with, the basics, how often, in what way, and when, down to more the deeper part of it. What do you need? What do you want? What do we need, and what can we do to meet each other's needs? Because what the Bible teaches is that this is one of the ways we serve each other. When we meet one another's needs in this way, that is an important part of a marriage relationship.
Right.
So how do you keep a marriage alive and fresh? Well, you think about each other in that way, and you talk to each other about needs, desires, and wants. And we're out of time. So that brings us to the end of today's recording, and I hope you're enjoying this particular session. If you'll join us next week, we're going to talk about you keep the bedroom alive and fresh by trying to meet each other's needs, by trusting God about children, and about taking time to flirt, and about being practical, and even about treating challenges medically if that is needed. And so there's a lot yet to talk about in keeping the bedroom alive and fresh. It's Valentine's week, and I hope that all of you have a wonderful, happy Valentine's Day. And seriously, if we can help you in some way, reach out to us. You can always send us your questions. You can always send us your comments. If you want to go ahead and send us a tribute to your spouse, we are willing to take that as well. So we'd love to hear from many of you about that. Well, it's been a good day so far. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.